Hey Maria, I think I got it. If you want to check me. for the world.
We do.
Yeah.
And we don't.
And it's a workshop.
Do. I'm just gonna send the text.
That's great. Yeah, she can mosey down for the world. So
We'll see if Molly shows up, but we can go ahead and get started as soon as you're ready, Lisa, to.
sure, you bet. Let me share my screen.
No,
No.
I'll be back here.
You never get to sit on that side of the room.
About where we're at with Prop 123 and here's.
Hi, Neil. All right. So this is not that different than the conversation that we had back in July when we had the joint meeting with Housing and Human Services. Much of the content in the memo was the same. This is just a little bit of an update on the topics that have kind of evolved since July. So a little bit of just kind of an update conversation. And then I pulled more of the comprehensive plan implementation table into this just to kind of get at least staff's opinion. And we can kind of go through those with PCDC just to make sure we're not missing something on implementation. So much of this is just a reminder. Again, the town has had affordable housing policies, kind of on the books now for at least a decade, kind of in their current form and fashion that have been building on one another. So again, back in 2016, we adopted a goal that 10% of the local housing stock should be affordable to residents earning 80% or less of the Boulder County AMI. That 10% is roughly where we are in reality today. So I think there's, a little bit of variability in kind of where we are actually meeting this goal, depending on the term of affordability and the degree of affordability, but approximately 10% of our units or close to it are affordable. Following that, in 2017, we adopted the Boulder County Regional Housing Partnerships Goals and Strategies, which countywide recommends 12% affordable housing stock. And then again, in 2024, we built on that with our Housing Futures Plan which was a recommendation, as you recall, in our 2023 comprehensive plan. That plan, as you remember, does not set a target amount. It more describes kind of like the characteristics of housing in Lions that we need. So I kind of wanted to pause here. There's more detail in the cover memo in terms of kind of where we are, but within the implementation table of our comprehensive plan, there are these first four goals and policies under HN1. So the big heading on this is expand and preserve workforce and affordable housing options. PCDC has kind of a responsibility or partner role in all of this. So again, the town board right now has kind of adopted what they call a kind of opportunistic housing strategy, right? So they, I think, are kind of willing to kind of entertain all ideas, rather than trying to say we are only interested in X or Y, right? So we're only interested in projects that meet the 60% affordability for this many units. I think they're keeping some flexibility. So I think from this perspective, I think you could follow the incorporate employee housing in future buildings and facilities, an opportunistic thing, if and when these opportunities arise, certainly we'll talk about them. Any questions on this first one? Okay. The next one is just noting that the comp plan called to update the 2014 housing needs assessment. And I kind of noted that, with the 2024 housing futures plan, that particular one is complete. However, as we're going to talk about later, we have additional work, kind of required by some of these state legislation and Prop 123 that require us to do some ongoing work in this area. HN1C, work with regional housing partners, residents, property owners on strategies to allow residents of existing mobile home parks and other lower income housing in the planning area to remain in the community. So again, I think this is kind of ongoing, and I think there's certainly efforts that we can demonstrate that have been doing this. So staff is, actively working with Regional Housing Partnership, which is comprised of all the Boulder County communities. We have an elected representative that also meets with the electeds, kind of in that same group. And again, opportunistically, where we find areas to improve outcomes, we certainly are. Boulder County Housing Authority recently acquired the 224 Seward property, which I just want to note, we have a pending application on the rezoning. So the application is in my inbox. They have not paid the fee for that. So we would need to consider that quasi-judicial at this point. But just high level, we'll talk about that high level, not necessarily the specifics of the rezoning. So again, a mix of, I think, kind of strategic action and opportunistic work. Any kind of thoughts or questions on that one? Okay, again, we'll talk about some of this as we go kind of further through the presentation. HN1D, the comp plan called for a review and update of the town's subdivision standards to encourage or incentivize a mix of housing type and establish formal criteria for community benefits such as affordable or workforce housing. This one I put in the cover memo that it feels to me we're so close to even though the comp plan certainly calls for this, we all know, implementing every item in the comp plan is not really feasible due to budget and staff. So I think at this point we would suggest waiting for some direction from the future town board on kind of what are their high level goals for the next term. I certainly as staff see some opportunity to streamline certain types of subdivisions. And I included an example in the cover memo, where for new unplatted property, we require kind of 3 rounds. And I think, just that's time and cost. So I think there's certainly opportunities to streamline subdivision regulations, but any questions or disagreement on kind of that approach for now? Anything from you on that, Trustee Williams? Okay. All right, we're going to switch to the next goal. Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
Hey.
Yes, absolutely.
Working at
Mhm.
that's the works, it helps.
Does help.
Using there are a variety of tools that can be applied, and it makes a difference.
I agree. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more in this grant opportunity up here, because I have a few ideas that I'd love your feedback on for some future conversations with the board. But I agree. I think that's one of those, it doesn't actually really cost a lot of money to do process improvements. It certainly takes staff time to do those, but they are actually meaningful.
Would that be the fast track?
Fast track, I think, again, some of the just communication strategies on certain different topics. Sorry, I don't want to skip ahead if you all are still want to stay on that one.
And just the C word, just preserving.
Yeah.
Affordable, the deeply affordable. It's worth calling out, and there have been people on staff working on that for a long time, so.
Yes.
Glad to see there's.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's going to be multi-phase conversations for sure. We'll talk. Yeah, we'll talk about Yeah, I have definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about Seward a little bit more. I have that. We can talk more specifically. So the next goal, encourage a diversity of housing options that meet the needs of a dynamic population. Again, so this next one, HN2A, engage the community, so more community engagement to explore zoning changes that would allow duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes in central neighborhoods. Again, similar to the subdivision standards, I think, should the future board want to kind of further explore, I think there's, certainly opportunity in our code that we could take a number of different strategies moving forward, right? Right now, we have kind of a disparity in some of our minimum lot sizes with our actual lot sizes in some of our neighborhoods, right? Even so, right sizing that could be a strategy, even if we don't go down the duplex, triplex path, right? Or actually allowing duplexes and triplexes, but I think we would need to wait for a future board to get direction on if they're interested in doing that engagement to understand more. The ADUs, certainly we've done work in ADUs and I have an update on that as well. Again, development incentives that encourage the development of units that meet the town's housing need. Again, I think this board has taken kind of this opportunistic strategy for thinking about things like fee waivers, correlating that to the degree of affordability and the number of units and the costs associated with a project. So it seems to me, the last few years, we've kind of taken a custom approach based on the project's needs for that. I think there are there is some merit in having those types of conversations, but also having policies on the books which say, the town will engage you, in these types of conversations. And here's some example packages, right, that could be considered. So I think there's more work we could do there to signal openness to some of those conversations. And then finally, HN2C, again, continue to study innovations in modular homes, small home construction, PUD, and potentially revise land use and building codes. To the degree our building codes are up to date, right? We're actually in conversations with the town board right now we're on the 21s. We're having conversations to go up to the 24s. We'll be getting some further direction from the board if they're interested in doing that on March 2nd. So for those of you that care about building codes, you can chime in on the March 2nd work session. Certainly staff, I think, stays apprised of some of the high level best practices, but I am curious from Planning Commission or PCDC, kind of on all of these, are there areas where, you think we could lean in a little more right now with what we have? Go ahead.
The big issues is always fire
Mm.
mitigation and fire issues,
Mhm.
related issues, because on one hand, there's a high desire to be as safe as we possibly can relative to fire because of the risk. It seems to be getting worse over time. And the other hand is affordability, because most of the measures do add to the substantially to the cost of building or adding any kind of move.
So I don't know that on day one, I would use the word substantial for the added cost at new construction. I think it's, maybe less than 5%, based on some of the studies that I've seen, based on the type of building materials and what our energy code is already requiring. I think retrofit definitely can be significant and substantial. But there have been some studies that a lot of folks are doing now that the state wildfire resiliency code has been published to try and document the cost at time of new construction. And it's not nothing, but I don't know that, I guess it depends on what you would quantify as significant.
Well, in the average, right now, if you look at
Mhm.
there might be one or two in this town.
Well, just the overall cost of housing is certainly expensive. Yeah.
Building
Right.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
because it's already increasing costs.
Yes.
And so just the notion of either adding, well, sprinklers, I guess only for commercial.
Our code does require sprinklers for new residential. Not ADUs less than 800 square feet.
Well,
There may be, if an alternative is allowed under the building code, then they could seek that alternative. I'm not aware offhand of that.
Until a couple of years ago, townhouses were exempted under a Lions specific policy, but that's been changed
Sprinklers or
for sprinklers.
is this, we're only talking multifamily, right?
No, single family, they're also required. It's only ADUs less than 800 square feet. We exempt that.
I know some, well, Commerce City used to require that, now they don't do, so I mean, it is something
I think some communities are going back the other way.
studying. And
Pros and
it's
cons.
trade-
yeah,
But it can be $30,000 when you're trying to get a start. It's not.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
it's just the notion that.
Yeah. Yes, we have competing goals for sure.
It makes it very, very. Unless there are plans. Developed. That try to optimize that.
Yeah.
Work at trying to optimize the relationship, so. If ADUs below a certain, size limit, don't have to have sprinklers, would, tiny home village also be exempt, or could be exempt?
I believe tiny homes do not have to have sprinklers. I'd have to check in the building code, but I don't think tiny homes are required to
Yeah,
have
so-
sprinklers.
But anyway, not going into
Yeah.
any other detail, but just the plans are bringing together all of the things that could support portability,
Mm-hmm.
and safety,
Mm-hmm.
in an optimized way. By thinking in advance, and that's a little different than purely opportunistic.
Yes.
You know, having some preparation for what to do when the opportunity becomes possible.
That I agree with you, and I think that's kind of where I was saying with the town, right? Like, I think not, being more proactive with some of these policies, I think would be beneficial. Just so we all, I think, have a baseline of like this, not this, or at least an understanding of what the board would prefer if and when they have to make a decision on it, so we can, as we have those conversations and initial conversations, that's helpful. Any other thoughts on this one?
I'll have more thoughts on tax bill, just,
Oh, there we go.
I just showed.
Yeah, mine came up in the mail today.
I have an open mind.
Something,
School district and fire district are the top three.
Yeah. Yes.
but I think. Town life doesn't, I think they need to celebrate themselves a little bit, just because. Of all the years, you've been a planner for decades, and I've been a planner, been around this for decades, and been to planning, presentations about, affordable housing. You never hear of communities actually getting close to their goals. Always,
Agreed.
the fact, and a wealthy community too.
Yeah.
Yet Lions has done that. And no one's like announcing or recognizing, or at least, the governor or someone should say something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's fair. Yeah.
It just, he's never, you don't see, well, there were 2,000 people, 2,100 people.
Yeah.
But you don't, you like in places like Chicago or wealthy places, you always have to live like 45 minutes away to get
Mhm.
because,
No, I appreciate that. I do think Lions has been more proactive than some of our neighboring communities, and I think we see the results of that. That being said, the state keeps moving the bar, and we still keep seeing challenges to solve, right? But
Yeah.
I do think that's good to acknowledge, like, yeah.
it's something I've been thinking about all.
Yeah.
You never want to, I never, ever, I haven't seen a single community in the country able to say that, you know what I mean? And I'm sitting there like, it's like, you can't say, 'cause you can't get comfortable with it, you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Right.
Anyway.
Any thoughts from you, Trustee Williams, on kind of this comp plan and some of these policies and advancing these?
No, the only thing that I'm sort of conscious of is that we get these incentives, or we get these mandates, or we establish our own goals. And because these are often coming from different places, there really are different definitions.
Yeah.
So different AMI levels, different codes that people want us to follow, including for ADUs versus tiny versus townhomes versus other multifamily. It can get a little bit not disjointed exactly, not confusing exactly, but fragmented, I guess the way you put it. And in fact, I contributed to that some. When I built something, I thought of the affordability requirements that I was going to volunteer, and then later realized that they didn't match up with what some other people might have expected Lions to do. So I would just, as we're looking at all these different ideas about what we could do, let's think about how they fit together.
And how they to our priorities locally.
Exactly. And I wish we had the luxury of only picking our priorities, but we do have to be conscious of all these other demands on us and forces that are beyond our control.
I agree, and I appreciate that, because I do think sometimes the opportunistic way means, which is perfectly fine, right, to also have that, means when that developer approaches us, right, it may or may not fit in all of these other goals that, and so to be able to communicate upfront, you know, we are trying to do all of these things for these reasons, and projects that align better with this, you know, are more likely to receive, you know, be received in a more positive way. It's complicated.
Different definitions of prominence is another sticking point that varies across almost every one of these.
Yes, especially when you start trying to stack different funding sources. All right, so Prop 123, we talked about this a little bit. Again, it's been in place. It was adopted by the Colorado voters a few years ago. It is intended to generate roughly $300 million for affordable housing funding because of some shortfalls at the state level. Some of that is getting redirected, but there still is funding available. As you all recall, the town, one of the funding pots is eligible for communities that opt in, have 3 years to meet certain obligations. One of those is increase our local affordable housing units by 10. We have until the end of this year to do so. Boulder County Housing Authority and myself have a meeting with DOLA tomorrow to talk about the 224 Seward property. We understand that there's pretty good likelihood that we could count those as a preservation or mobile home, you know, kind of acquisition on its face. But I think BCHA wants to understand from DOLA if they also intend to rezone and potentially make improvements over time. You know, what does that do to our Prop 123 commitment? You know, kind of how we connect these. So we'll hopefully be able to learn more, a little bit more about that tomorrow, and I can certainly follow up at a future meeting, at a staff update with what we hear. Fast track compliance. Yeah. None, unless 224 Seward counts. So we, Carter Court, we believe, you know, there's a chance Carter Court can make it. Boulder County Housing Authority is still working through some design feasibility on that project. It's moving more slowly than we had hoped, but it's still possible, but that would only be probably 4 units.
And I might make a change on one of my properties that would get us 2 credits.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know that. That's great.
So I'm working with DOLA on counting naturally occurring.
Yep.
So somebody would have to go scrub the
Yep.
MLS. and see, but there seem to be a little bit more favorable, the price point.
Okay.
Like,
I was-
it seems like up to 100.
Oh,
So,
if 224 sewer doesn't count, then I'm gonna have, we'll have to go down that route. Because I do think it's important that if the town can meet that, if we can meet that commitment, we should.
what happens if we don't?
Then we are not eligible in the next round funding cycle. And
Which is really how much what
we have yet to receive any Prop $123. The town hasn't applied for Prop $123. I think it's always good to keep our options open should there become a project. Again, it's one of those kind of opportunistic, right? Like if there's a project that we feel like, they have land banking funds, although the land banking funds to date have all been on kind of shovel-ready projects. They have some of the homeowner, ADU eligibility things. So I think it's always just good to have options, particularly if we can meet it.
we would just take those options on the table.
Yeah. So fast track compliance is one of the other pieces of our local obligation. And that essentially states that for projects that meet the Prop 123 kind of requirements for affordability, that have at least 50% of the units in a project meeting that degree of affordability, we have to approve their application within 90 days. And it's only certain applications for the town. It's basically like the development plan. And a number of communities, our code is not a barrier to that, right? It's mostly just kind of our own capacity, internal capacity that would allow us to do that. But we have demonstrated that we can process applications within that 90 days. So in our upcoming board packet, hopefully on the 17th, DOLA has a template resolution that basically we approve as a town and provide some documentation, I think, of like, we've done this, this, and this in this time frame to demonstrate we've done that. And then we can meet our fast track obligation. If we do this by June 30th, we are eligible for a no match $45,000 planning grant. And this is something I'd be curious for PCDC, so my thought on that is potentially just to create, again, some process and communications and strategy around ADUs, right? So as you know, we've approved the ADUs and the board would have to approve this in the future, kind of this whole concept for what we would do with the money is if they approve the fast track resolution. But I know we have some opportunity here with this recently adopted ADU ordinance that I just haven't had time to get the word out and communicate in a manner that hopefully will get folks in the door. But what else do you see that you think a grant could help support?
Any grant. So
Yeah.
anything related to
Housing.
housing?
Needs to be housing related.
We talked once upon a time about. Write some language in our code that would directly support certain types of PUDs.
Mm,
But this was like 3 or 4 planners ago, so I have no idea if there's still
okay.
for it. But the idea was that it was around the time you were working on your project. And basically taking the model that Trustee Williams said, maybe trying to come up with something generalized that would look like our code supported it. Be a signal to others wanting to replicate that.
Okay.
We're a small town, so who knows?
Yeah. Is that kind of your recollection?
Yeah, we were on the cusp of maybe trying to develop or adopt an affordable housing PUD. And having not quite done that, we wondered whether we should move forward with the project that was in the hopper.
Okay.
And then return to that when we got about a decade. I'm not sure we ever quite returned to it.
It's not ever been on my radar, so I think that's an interesting idea though.
It's just, it was like, well, when projects like, if a project like this comes around, we like want to be able to support it. And we were kind of scrambling to deal with it because we didn't really know how. And so if there was like just a really even just faintest structure of a PUD, affordable residential is kind of the idea. We don't have to necessarily call it that, but.
I would like to explore that further. Again, I think that would be something that also, again, connecting with the future board's priorities, right, for housing, but um, yeah, I certainly can see some pros and cons to trying to kind of, again, that opportunistic custom versus like you do this and we're really happy. So
So discussed once upon a time about trying to understand the minimum lot size standard, that if we
Yep.
were to propose alternative, what would the possible effect be? So there's always this conceptual idea of, oh, lower the lot standard.
yep,
There will be some lots that will bifurcate, maybe when
Yep.
owners want to do that. But are we talking about, 5 or 6, or are we talking dozens? We don't know.
that's, I've had consultants look at that in the past and they do a little bit of a blended, like, here's the market valuation, here's the market average for the cost of land, here's kind of your cost of construction, right? And then they're trying and understand like how many people, like where is, if people are basing those decisions on where can they maximize the market, kind of, are you ripe for that or are you not, right? So there are methodologies to do those types of studies. And sometimes I've been surprised at the results, right? Like where I thought, okay, we would actually see certain types of development if you allowed more flexibility in the zoning. What the result actually showed is that the more expensive single families, which is what was getting built, the market still was going to prefer those, even if you let people build smaller or more units. So it is an interesting exercise. Doesn't mean you can't allow them, but I think if you're worried about the proliferation, it's certainly that market factor that comes into play too.
Yeah, and really quickly, I mean, we just looked at a couple of properties. What are we talking about? A couple of larger sort of double lots,
Mhm.
north of us, and like once you factor in for like, side yard setbacks, and even if you did them north-south, front and back, the setbacks really they became very tidy, small little structures.
Mhm.
So that was kind of where we got to the point of stopping chewing on it,
Mhm.
but volunteer commission, so.
One thing that I thought was interesting is, not that long ago, in GIS, I pulled all the parcels that are in the kind of the central part of town in the original platted areas and, in the R1 zone district, and the R1 zoning requires a 7,000 square foot lot size minimum. But based on the Boulder County parcel size, which is not survey accurate, some are going to be a little less, some are going to be a little more, but 24% of those parcels were less than what the zone district requires, right? So we've got this like zone district in R1 that 24% of our parcels are non-conforming, and we have provisions for that in our code, right? But do we want to limit future people from doing what already exists today, right? That's a question I think too that would be interesting in that same type of vein of smaller lots. They exist today, and so just an interesting kind of thought exercise there. Again, future board, I think, but I do think that is similar to that work talked about in the comp plan,
Yeah, but as far as what, I don't know, like $45,000 worth of consultant work would get you, I don't know if those things are too big or too small, what.
I think we'd have to kind of tailor it into a little bit of a project, and it probably would depend on how much data we have. But yeah, I think $45,000, is not nothing that could help certainly with that.
The Common Sense Institute, which is a
Yeah.
nonpartisan economic think tank for the state, just put out a starter home toolkit on providing guidance to local governments and
Yeah.
to bring back the starter home. So that could be worth,
Mhm.
yeah.
Strong towns, right? They've got kind of the housing ready community guides, things like that.
I just want putting the kind of communication and stuff when it's so expensive
To build an ADU. I would certainly be open to, we'll see what the board would like to do, but I think pivoting that to, broader strategy, certainly.
Give it to the person to
I mean, it could be, but I don't know if we could actually use it for an incentive. No, but I mean, honestly, right? Like that could be on the table. I do need to look a little bit more about kind of the parameters for what that could be used for. Well, we're going to put the resolution in the packet on the 17th. The board may want to talk about it a couple times. I don't know. But before we would accept a grant by the end of by the, whenever, I'm not sure when the grant acceptance deadlines are, we'd have to have a scope that we get board approved.
Am I assuming that that would be probably, that would pay for a consultant to do some additional planning work, right?
That's my thought.
Yeah, there's also like, we have a ridiculous array of R1 zonings in our town. And I don't know if that's a project that a consultant could look at of like, what would be the impact of trying to like, you know, simplify that blend of R1s into like 1 or 2 offerings.
You mean like the R2 and 2A and 3, like that? Hi.
Question. I wanted to say we had like 5 or 6 different residential zoning that involves. But maybe I'm mistaken.
So we have, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I can pull up the zoning map here real quick.
Did I?
Yep.
Double. The grants. The building.
Yep, and I have a slide on that. We have that already, yes. Yes, that is still on hold. So I'll share my screen just so you can kind of see our zone district zoning map. So we have kind of one R1 zone district, which is the kind of largest majority of properties in town. That includes both like Stone Canyon, Lions Valley, Eagle Canyon up here, the majority. And then we have a, what's that? Oh, that's weird. Why is it not switching?
No,
Oh, I know why. Hold on.
seven still be safe, I think here.
Oh, there you go, okay.
I know why. Okay, here you go. So as you can see, right, like we have a lot that's straight R1, but then we have R2A, R3, R2. And then those allow like more than one unit depending on the size of the lots. But like this one is R2, but it's, you know, single family. So yeah, I do think some analysis of our, it feels like we adopted kind of a typical zoning scheme and dropped it on our town and didn't necessarily tailor it to what we have.
In my mind, it was rural residential.
Oh, there is all that too.
Yeah. It's kind of-
Yeah, I mean, we have the like rural estate residential, estate, yeah, we have estate country maybe. And then we have the ag zone districts. Yes, if you look at the entirety of our residential zone district mix, there's a lot.
Just seems like intuitively there's really only 2.
Low density.
Residential central and- But whatever, it doesn't matter. I just find it to
Yeah.
be a little confusing from a land use
Mhm.
strategy standpoint. Like whenever we do comp plan, it's like, why do we have all these? Unclear, but too big of a bite to try to fix during a comp plan.
I don't disagree. I do think some look at, because I've also seen like our R2 zone district, which again, some of our single families are zoned R2 and they have a 10-foot side setback, whereas our R1 has a 5-foot setback, right? And we have houses that are non-conforming with that, right? Which they can't do an addition even if it's a single family house. So I do think to even allow our existing residents to do reasonable development on the lots, it would be an interesting conversation to kind of more align the zoning with what we have and what we want.
Maybe a couple random ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I appreciate that. Great. Any other thoughts, trustee, on this one? Okay. All right, let me go back to the presentation. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bernie. Possibly. I'd probably have to kind of pre-scope that with some consultants and understand kind of, you know, how much we could get for $45,000.
Yeah, you can't, yeah, I mean, it's sitting damn overhead and, yeah, so. Yeah.
It's hard to get a lot for $45,000. Yeah.
Question.
Well, I mean, like DOLA has like the model land use code, right? That is, trying to be housing supportive. I think for this conversation for the residential zone districts, again, it probably depends a little bit on how much you want to try and at least allow existing homeowners do reasonable development on the properties they have. And then how much you also want to encourage change, right? So zoning codes can kind of do two things. They can do a lot of things, right? So kind of what are you trying to achieve with some of these changes?
Size, material, safety, and regulation, if you will, to support affordable housing. Housing that would be made affordable.
That's a fascinating question. That's a good question. Let's keep that in mind as we think about, possible ways, because I like that, to your point, right? You've got a lot of, intersecting.
Yeah, so is what in that sense to make sure that the definitions don't become a barrier within the implementation.
I hear you. It's a good question. I don't have the answer offhand. All right.
I don't think we have a. formal
No, but I think you've given me some ideas that we certainly can bring back to the board with kind of, if they want to pursue this, here are some options that PCDC suggested for ways to potentially help. We don't have to go through these, but again, as part of Prop 123, the board adopted a resolution in 2025 looking, kind of at these strategies. So a number of these we've done. Some of them I think would require, again, kind of alignment with the future board's priorities. So we can, again, I think there's still more to do here. Go ahead.
Just the expedited review for affordable housing up to 120% AMI is. I think typically affordable housing means from deed restriction. But
Yes. Well,
I don't think there's a legal reason to not include naturally occurring
mhm.
home at 120%. I just do. That opens up.
Prop 123 calls it permanently affordable,
Yeah.
which could be deed or it could be one of 10 other mechanisms. But there probably does have to be some enforcement mechanism, not what we typically call naturally occurring.
So again, there's the there's the Prop 123, and Prop 123 requires 100% AMI for sale.
Yeah.
And 60 for rent. So I think would expand that, right? So for this town board's policy that said we'd also like expedited development review for and again, undefined affordable housing for up to 120, right? So I think this board is recognizing, expedited review is beneficial for projects beyond kind of the limitations of Prop 123. So that's kind of how I look at this. Or
And also these strategies are not binding.
No.
They're just, these are the ones that we found to be interesting, right? If I recall.
I wasn't here when the board adopted this, but yeah, I think generally.
Does that
Okay.
recall?
I don't think those-
No.
Feasible. All
I
right.
think we were like
Four.
required to choose 3 or 4, if I remember right, and we
Yeah.
chose more than that.
I think so. All right. So Senate Bill 24-174, sustainable affordable housing. This was one of the slew of housing and housing related bills passed by the Colorado legislature, signed by the governor in 2024. Dude, this one, a number of them received kind of significant opposition. This was the one bill that was CML supported, so it's a little different, I think, than some of the others. Colorado Municipal League, so it's kind of the organization that represents local governments. So there's multiple components of this bill. The first is that, certain communities need to adopt a compliant housing needs assessment with the bill. The 2024 Housing Futures Plan was not compliant with that bill. And I think in a little bit of an effort to meet the state legislation, Dr. Cog worked with DOLA to get their regional HNA to meet the DOLA requirements to satisfy this bill, and then opened it up to all of the communities to kind of sign on to the Dr. Cog HNA to meet our local obligation. We did that. There was a 3-month window last summer from, I think, July to September. Although, we do note the town had significant concerns with some of the data and assumptions in the Dr. Cog, our regional housing needs assessment. We shared those with DOLA. So hopefully when it comes time to develop our housing action plan, which is due January 1st of 2028, we'll either have better data from Dr. Cog, or we can kind of work to align that with more local data. Some of that is still TBD. And then kind of the final main component is this bill requires the town do further work on our water supply and strategic growth in our comp plan. And that is due by the end of this year. And this is also something that the grant potentially, if we get this $45,000, we potentially could look at that. The thing I'm kind of still waiting for is to see how, DOLA's published their guidance on how to meet this, but I'm kind of curious to see what communities are actually producing in response to these requirements, kind of the complexity, the work, stuff like that. Any questions on this bill or this work? Trustee Williams, anything else to add on this one? Okay. All right. Boulder County. So again, 12%, the county has a goal of 12% of housing countywide will be affordable. As you know, in 2023, voters in Boulder County passed the Affordable and Attainable Housing Tax, which in 2025, the town of Lyons accepted $900,000 from these tax dollars. We actually have received those funds from the county. $700,000 of those are allocated toward Carter Court development. Again, we're still kind of in feasibility on that. $200,000 is for kind of additional study and evaluation on the 224 Seward property, things like what's required for infrastructure, what's required for maybe some slope stabilization, things like that. I think we all assume redevelopment over time, but as you know, we have existing residents that live there. And so we want to really be sure that we're sensitive to that. So as I mentioned, we received the rezoning application for that. So you'll be hearing that probably in your March meeting if things move along as we're anticipating. And so staff will continue to work with BCHA on some kind of initial planning work with that $200,000. And then generally with the tax, it's expected to receive around $16 to $17 million annually. The town of Lyons generates maybe around $100,000 for that annually from our sales and use tax. 35% of the total funds stay in the county to for supportive services for residents to maintain housing. And then 65% of those funds go toward development, kind of a population-based split. So 30% goes to Longmont, 32% to Boulder, and then the remainder of the Boulder County community split 38%. And how the allocations are determined is a committee of the city managers of all the Boulder County communities. They meet together twice a year, kind of talk about who's ready, who has projects that need funds, and then they make a recommendation to the commissioners. So we're just year one into this, so a little bit of this will kind of flesh out over time. There's also $500,000 that they peeled off of this is what they're calling an innovation fund grant. It's still kind of yet to be determined how Boulder County is going to allocate that. Any questions on this one? Anything to add on this one, Trustee Williams? Okay.
Boulder County saying 12%. We're just committed 10%.
It's interesting. If you look at that plan, it just says the heading of the table where it says Lyons and Nederland are 10%, it says like possible distribution scenario, and then it says Lyons and Nederland 10%, just due to our, land use constraints. So the heading of that table, I think, is like possible distribution scenario. So, and then it talks about how Lyons and Nederland, might be considered a little differently than the 12% countywide. And then finally for grants, yes, we do.
Can we go
Yep.
back to the
Yeah.
numbers?
Yeah,
So it's 16-17 million.
this sales tax, the AAHT generates 16 to 17 million dollars is what they project annually gets generated from this tax. Well, 35% gets peeled off. Yeah, so 35%.
Of this.
Yep. Yes, we get 38% of the 60. So they pull 500,000 off the top for the innovation fund, 35% for that. So yeah, we got, I think it's like $3 million, the 3 to 4 million, the smaller communities are.
Is there any indication of what kind of projects they?
The first couple years, I think are projects that were pretty much already kind of in the pipeline, right? Like Willoughby Corner and Lafayette is getting, I think, $1.5 million each for the next couple of years, just because they already have that going. I can't remember. I can certainly follow up with the 25 allocations, but
Curious.
yeah, I think it's projects that are, what's that?
What about?
Allen's Park is, I'm not sure how involved they are in those conversations. Are they incorporated?
No.
So they're, and they would just fall under kind of the Boulder County BCHA. Yeah.
So that brings up, simple.
Okay.
That says. Lion says relatively low, jump back to the
Mhm.
pretty. Pretty. We have a low commitment.
Yeah.
Of 10 over 3 years.
Mhm.
Come to do this year, I guess. Which is much lower than Boulder County, 129. If affordable housing were built somewhere like the Highland Drive
Yeah.
area, it would benefit the town of Lyons.
Yes.
In terms of workforce housing.
Yep.
And if the county did it,
Mhm.
it would address some of their need to, for their 129 commitment that
Yep.
they have. And Lions economically benefits, and in a variety of ways, without us having to annex it. True.
Yes. I don't think it would meet our Prop 123 obligation,
No.
but there certainly would be benefits to the town. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All I'm saying is obligations otherwise.
What do you mean otherwise?
Who's-
Through Seward? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that instead of trying to annex property out there in order to build affordable housing, let the county do it. Because it still benefits the town of Lyons,
Mhm.
and we could work with them cooperatively to help get it done. And the town benefits, but doesn't have to go through the annexation processes and.
I don't think the town would get in the way of that happening at all. I don't know. I think the county's overall land use policy is to trying to drive development within the municipalities. But I think certainly I don't think, we would try and block that.
Yeah, that would be one of the, it would be, they could actually benefit by having that place where it's relatively close to, utilities for.
Mhm.
Although there's, and we have problems in that, other problems.
Yeah.
It's just a thought of having, another alternative in our back pocket.
Definitely. So in terms of grants, we still have the DOLA grant for the joint housing coordinator with the town of Netherland. Netherland is the lead on that, and they still have not moved forward with posting that position, so we met with them a week and a half ago, just to try and understand now that they've got the Eldora acquisition, you know, at least the kind of the major structure done, if they are still intending to move forward. I think they're not sure, so we're still kind of paused on that one. And then the board, we had the DOLA grant for the exploration of the multi-jurisdictional housing authority. Gilpin County was the lead. That included Central City, Nederland, Lyons. We heard an update that the last board meeting, and they directed to not pursue that further for Lyons, just given that, you know, BCHA, I think, is, you know, more active in Lyons and reorganized in a way that we don't necessarily need to duplicate efforts. So we're not going to be, to the degree we need to meet our grant obligations, we will, but we're not going to be bringing that back to the board for any further action. And then again, the possibility for $45,000, we'll see, kind of where the board would like to go on that. Grants, as you know, are great, but then they also have obligations that come with them too. So that's all I have for you. But I'm certainly happy to take any more questions or kind of see, I guess, Trustee Williams, any of your thoughts on this kind of overall housing update?
Question.
Yeah.
So our development goal or target or obligation, as we're 10 affordable units, that's over a 3-year period.
Mhm.
And so if we don't meet that goal, that means the next 3-year period, we're out of any opportunities for grant.
There might be some catch-up provisions that maybe we could start at, you know, if we can kind of get back in, but I haven't looked at those yet because I'm hopeful we'll meet it.
If it looks like we're not, it'd be nice to know if that urgency exists. We'll
I-
have 3 years of grants opportunities.
I think if the meeting with DOLA is not successful tomorrow, getting, you know, some degree of assurance that 224 Seward, you know, what do we need to do, then I need to get my arms around that for sure.
What's needed.
Yep. Building permits issued by the end of the year. That's the trigger.
That.
Again, Carter Court we could, but that's only 4. So no, that's just it. I think it's probably, think at this point it's February. We probably have to assume we have to start coming up with our plan B and our plan C if 224 Seward is not happening, if not eligible.
I know it's been asked before, but it's like.
I don't remember.
We had in. Like, those could count. couldn't they?
Well, that's what I think, again, where I need to start doing a deeper dive into some of those alternative means of compliance
Not just any.
for the naturally occurring. Because we do have 3 ADU permits that we issued last year.
If you got your 2.
I can definitely get to, it's not obvious how I would expand beyond 2, but
Yeah, thanks for studying that. Seeing how close we are.
Yeah.
That would be unfortunate to lose out on those 3.
I agree.
Potential.
A property that was TIVA property.
Mhm. Yeah.
That portion.
It's owned residential. Mhm.
That. To try to get. things forward.
I agree.
Yeah.
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 And I think he's very open to that, and our conversations, just the infrastructure conversations are moving very slowly. So I think I don't see a path where we would get building permits out there this year. With the water and ditches and CDOT.
The purpose of the DOLA meeting tour, the main information you'll get is about the sewer.
So we're meeting collectively with BCHA. So on its face, it looks like the 224 Seward property probably qualifies, but the questions are around, you know, what happens, because BCHA certainly intends to, you know, make some changes on the property over time. So does that disqualify us in the future? Are we still qualified? So we just want to make sure. And then what is the documentation required? How do we get that ball rolling? So if it's not complicated, I think Town of Silverton was the first community that kind of fulfilled all their Prop 123 obligations. Maybe we'll get up on the list and get in the news a little bit there to promote us. We'll see.
I think sorry. Just you're wealthy. Can't say I just, you know.
Yep.
Do you know, or does anyone know how many homes we lost in the flood and how that same affordability range was brought back?
I want to say I heard like 80
I
homes
would say
were
80,
lost in
you
the
know, me.
flood.
So,
Yeah, there were final numbers done on that about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the PDC.
But in terms of what got built back and where we are in affordability, I have no idea.
Like, homes project, yeah.
it was
Oh,
like
that's
20.
well, that's 40 units out at Summit. I think it's 40 total, but those permits were issued prior to Prop 123. That commitment. Oh, yeah. Oh, got it. Just in terms of overall flood recovery.
And you probably could count the 9 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably could count the habitat.
Yeah, they have to come share. Yeah. 3 or 4.
6. There's 6 habitat homes, you're 9, 40. Yeah, that's 55. Yep, some ADUs on that.
We should make that.
Yeah, I know.
I agree. That's where I need like a little bit of a marketing brain to like put together all of our stuff and a way to communicate it out in a really nice, easy way.
It always ends up being a little bit of a mixed message because so few of the people who,
Yeah.
specific people who lost their homes ended up in the new homes that we provided.
Well,
That's true.
Mhm.
it irritates me when people take that approach, just because, okay, people move away and then they establish themselves, just can't expect them just to come back like after 10 years. You know what I mean? You know, I do, I appreciate the effort, without a doubt, I appreciate being offered to people, but when you've established your life, you know, you don't, you know, it's a rationale that, you know, like my husband uses it with me too. It's like, well, you know, well, we need people to be able to like, we need to have our obligation to have some people can actually live and work in town, but they aren't. The people who live there aren't working in town. I was like, no, but they will never be able to do that if we don't have that option. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you switch around and, you know, but yeah, it's just, anyways.
And on the flip side, most of the people that I hear from have never lived here. They
Yeah.
just want to.
Yeah.
They want it to be cheap. And we have a lot of kids that grew up here who can't live here because they don't meet that AMI to be in affordable housing, but
Mhm.
there is nothing here to get. And even if you ask Google, why is it expensive to live in Lyons, you get a pretty straightforward answer. So I accidentally asked that today.
That's funny.
What did-
That's funny.
So we've discussed over the years. Really, the need for just more diverse
Yeah.
housing types.
Yeah, more
For
diverse.
all those reasons you just said, for seniors who want to downsize,
Yeah.
who want to free up that larger home for a family to move. I think we keep
Mhm.
trying
Well-
to think about that.
I totally do. And I think, right, like some of these trains are already moving, right? Like Prop 123, we have our marching orders for that, right? Some of these state bills, we're doing that. I think, you know, the ADUs, I feel like the town did a lot of work on ADUs last year. And then I think to the degree the future town board is interested, you know, some of these kind of refinements of zoning, I think there might be you know, once we get the, you know, kind of the wildfire code up and implemented here in the next couple months, might be some capacity if that's a board priority to kind of dive into some of those next level comprehensive plan implementation strategies for housing. Yeah.
Bill was mentioned a couple of times earlier today that community involvement is
Yep.
very important.
Yes.
And I'll just say that the marketing aspect of what the plans are, as not been done well previously. And we've never, at least I'm aware of, developed a compelling value proposition for what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
So that's part of the overall message, the framing of the plan. if you will. It's like we've put out plans and, and then we hear, well, it's gonna cause parking problems, it's gonna cause traffic problems, it's gonna, and after that, somebody says, well, but it's for working, fans.
Mhm.
Instead of the value proposition being upfront and why that value proposition is more beneficial to the town and the residents
Mhm.
than worrying so much about, having to wait 2 cars to go through a stop sign.
I think that's a really interesting point, right? There's competing concerns and some of these.
Right, well, I mean, we could probably have another, 20-25 residences in town. And you would hardly notice the change in traffic or parking. And so I think those kinds of concerns should be addressed up front. And the value proposition gets to, the availability of amenities, the people at the staffing of all of the businesses. in
Mhm.
town.
Mhm.
Yeah, so and so and so.
Yeah.
So that, as we're involving the community overall, we're doing it in a way of saying, let's do something that's good for the overall community, and here's what, here is the good that it's going to do. And do it thoroughly, not just, a phrase or two that gets thrown in the middle of the, trying to engage the population. And the other issue that we've had is sort of springing a plan on people, that is interpreted as they're gonna put a giant, apartment building across the street from my house.
Right.
And so that we don't immediately, raise hackles, but rather solve problems with the community involved.
Fair. Any other thoughts before we?
It's a good point. Wasn't one of our comp plan bullets about
Community engagement, yeah. Yep, for sure.
it would be nice to have a good message on the economic development impact of
Right.
more housing.
And blending into that it's not just, to me, a really good plan for Lyons wouldn't be just affordable housing.
Right.
It would be, rooftops, because rooftops is what drives the use of the businesses. And people talk about, well, it's costly to have, build a lot of residential. That's more costly than commercial development to the municipality.
Yes, yeah, there's certainly, right. It depends on kind of which way you're structuring the analysis and which factors you're taking in, and the long-term costs and the upfront costs and who pays them over time, and the scale and size of development and type of development. I think I'll pull those levers a lot, right? One size definitely does not fit all
Right.
in all of those.
So the housing plan could include, mid-price housing for, mid attainability, if you will.
Yeah.
And market rate.
Yep.
So what?
Don't really need any direction from you all tonight, and I mean, this is just a workshop, so I'm not really asking for direction, but I appreciate your feedback. And then as we move, kind of advance some of these conversations with the board in the next few weeks, I'll certainly report back to you all on, particularly this fast track resolution. And if they decide to pass that, and then some opportunities for grants, or what we could potentially spend $45,000. There are other grants that we're eligible for that are open right now. The ADU Supportive Jurisdiction Grant, again, that's just, struggling with capacity of managing a grant in addition to, the match that's not budgeted and things like that, right? So, I don't remember on this one. Again, I think this $45,000 might be a good first step of at least some initial work. Then if we would like to advance, some more work, we could build on that.
I feel like we've, as the PCDC and the board,
Yep.
have a lot of eggs in the ADU basket.
We do, and I'm happy to look at it. If this is the board, if the board would like to go in stronger on that, we certainly can. I just, yeah,
Even
I assume there's a match. Yeah, I assume there's a match. I know. There's a little bit of a crescendo right now, with trying to get some of the this current board's priorities done while they're still seated that aren't in front of PCDC. So I'm feeling a little bit of a crescendo of things that are trying to get done in the next few weeks. So,
thank you.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll still have the demo discussion, the outcome of that, the conversation with the board to follow up with you on too as well. We have the public hearing back, continued public hearing on natural medicine. So I'm going to talk about that code amendment on Wednesday morning. The EBC meets on Wednesday. So I will get some feedback from EBC on that, as well as, and town attorney has confirmed he is able to attend the next meeting. Yeah, it's a continued public hearing on the 23rd. Hey,
And you'll let us know what else we. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely.